I'll do a short recap of the geothermal route just for anybody who wants to catch up. But on the website, we have all the videos from going back a year or more covering geothermal and all the other ways to net zero. We've now got a roadshow on there, though the video is unfortunately 3 hours long, so you're going to have to hop, skip, and jump through to get the bits you want, I guess. We'll do the modelling. Somebody expressed an interest in the modelling, so I'll talk a bit about that. And Simon's going to spend a bit more time on the actual procurement process than I've tended to do in these Q&As before. Okay. So to recap geothermal, this is a diagram that was supplied to us by British Geological Survey. And the right-hand side of it is kind of a cross-section of the Earth and shows you the sort of 5 types of geothermal that are around. There's good old ground source stuff on the very left of that set of 5. Then there are things like mine water or shallow aquifers, the next one along. So in this procurement, we're talking about the 3 on the right for the most part. And those are the trusts that the BGS, they have got a good chance of getting an aquifer of some sort under the ground or hot rocks under the ground and doing deep geothermal. But we have now looked at a closed loop system, which is a bit like the one that's the 4th one along, in the sense that you go up and down one pipe or maybe a few pipes in parallel, but you go up and down each one. And that's a closed loop system, and that doesn't need an aquifer. So it will work in places that BGS says are not suitable because they don't have an aquifer. So I'll show you that in a minute. We went up to go and see it about 10 days ago, and it was an interesting trip, though not that you see much at a geothermal site, because once you've done them, there isn't much left there. And tomorrow we're at Eden. If anybody's driving past Eden and not coming, you can come in and see their geothermal installation, which again isn't a lot to see, but it heats the place. And we've got free tickets to Eden itself. So those are the types, the 3 to the right and the closed loop that we're considering. The left-hand sketch gives you an idea of temperatures, because there's a lot of nonsense spoken in this world about these things. So there are apparently 3 trusts in the UK, and one of them's on the line, Truro's on the line, who we think can get radiothermal granite and therefore get high temperatures, you know, in excess of 100 degrees, plus maybe even more. That's the green arrow. And that's because they're lucky enough to be in a really good patch. The rest of us either need the closed loop system, which is 1.5 kilometer boreholes that give you 45-degree water, or you're in the hot sedimentary aquifers and you're looking for water in the range of 45 to 80 odd degrees Celsius. There's a lot of talk in the industry about giving you steam and that kind of thing, but it's as far as we can tell, it's largely rubbish or pie in the sky. So, okay. The therapy system we went to look at in North Yorkshire has a slide of theirs. They just drill down, and you can see it's a coaxial pipe. It doesn't look too dissimilar to that fire hydrant-y thing it shows you here. And they pump cold water down with the main pipe, and then it comes back up a pipe in the middle, and it comes back hotter. And it just purely relies on the fact that the earth gets hotter as you go down. This rather optimistically says, you know, mentions temperatures of 90, 120, 150, 180 degrees C, but forget it. No trust is going to be able to afford a closed loop system that gets you those temperatures. So we're firmly in the new hospital program stroke, top it up with a heat pump world with these wells, but they could supply half or more of your heat energy and be very reliable. Okay, I've got a little video. It's not the world's best video, but it's Dr. Mullen who was very helpful in terms of us knocking on various doors and getting support for this program and getting Treasury to pay attention and the rest of it. So I thought I'd let him have a say.
Hi everybody. Sorry, despite it seems slightly random to have a member of Parliament at a NHS Estates meeting, but as mentioned, I actually became interested in deep geothermal because as you've heard, it's good in certain places of the country. Crewe, a town I represent, sits right on top of a really high potential area for deep geothermal, and I'm a doctor by background, not a geologist, and so I was a skeptic to start with, because I think when I first heard about this idea that there's this clean, green, reliable heat source, it just all sounded too good to be true, so it took some time to convince me. but I have been convinced. And I was actually asked by the Prime Minister to produce a review of deep geothermal for the country. And I guess why I wanted to be here today primarily is obviously you've got this fantastic suite of experts with you today, but there's always that nagging thought, isn't there, when you're talking to experts that, is this just the overt enthusiasm of an expert, and can we both be so sure that this can deliver? But as part of the review, I've been to Germany, I've visited a plant. There are actually hundreds of these plants across Europe. There are 250,000 homes in Paris that are heated by deep geothermal. And so because it would be a great thing for my area if we go further on deep geothermal, I'm part of an all-party group that's working to push it at a national level. But as part of the review that I did, what we sought to do with my review, which others have done as well, is actually engage at a local level with the people that want to deliver it. And actually what that taught me is that actually stakeholder engagement is really, really important. You've got people who've lived this experience in the room with you, Eden Geothermal, for example. They know how important that is. But what I want to do is make myself available. I couldn't be there, sorry, I broke my ankle a few weeks ago. But there are people from my office, and we've got a handout, and I'll talk to each of you on the tables to just help you with that side of things, that stakeholder engagement. Because what I learned is actually, whenever you talk about drilling in this country, it causes a certain reaction potentially from the public and the press, and actually Eden Geothermal have shown that can be really, really well managed, but actually everyone involved needs to manage it really, really well, because actually if one person doesn't manage it as well as they could have done, it makes it difficult for everybody. And what I've also learned about this is actually it's a new industry, and the more of us that do it, the easier it is for everybody to do it. So the more of them we can build with you on the NHS at the forefront of this really difficult decarbonisation challenge, that will make it easier for all sorts of other people to do deep geothermal. We can do deep geothermal in this country. There's no reason why most of the NHS sites above a great resource couldn't be using it, and many other places in the country. So don't be uncertain about it. It's a proven technology, and you've got a great opportunity today to hear about how you can progress it locally. And as I said, I'm happy to help with my experience when it comes to talking to MPs, councillors, the media, and even senior comms leaders at your trust about how you can go about doing it in a really, really effective way. So thank you for your time, and thank you for having me. I look forward to speaking to you all in the small groups.
So that was a bit about the geothermal. I'm just showing you the map. We've got all the major sites in the NHS mapped and where they sit. All the little red dots here with the fire here, I'm carrying them are ones at BGS. They are in areas over potential aquifers, and then the therapy systems can apply the others. So we've got all the major sites. We had you can see Northampton, Luton. People are talking about Nottingham in the area then. I know Nottingham has looked at intermediate depth wells, but I'm not sure where they're up to. But we'll pick that up after this meeting. There was some discussion about the financial models. So the financial model modeling was done largely by the Carbon Energy Fund, and it drew upon a number of databases, and provided you answered a few questions, it chucked out for you an idea about the capital cost, revenue benefits, and like of getting to net zero by the only real ways of getting to net zero. We can all make our hospitals more efficient, and we've been doing it for yonks. But to get to net zero, you've actually got to be in a position where you're using a net zero fuel and electricity, and wait for the electricity to get green. That's the only way of getting to proper net zero. So the model looks at geothermal energy. It looks at hydrogen, which is an option for some hospitals. 50 or 60 hospitals have a realistic chance of hydrogen within the NHS time window for net zero. There's qualifying district energy, which largely goes with the two above, or heat pumps. And I know lots of trusts are doing heat pumps, but the thing you find with heat pumps is the good old high voltage connection problem, and secondly, the high revenue costs associated with that. So this is this graph is from an exemplar trust. We model 100 and something hospitals. This is one of them, I can't remember which one. And the graph shows sort of dark grey and light grey. And if you draw the topmost line where the dark grey curves to the right and then goes back to light grey, that's the position of that particular hospital if it does nothing from where it is now to get to net zero, which is unlikely because we're obliged to do something. So the dark grey line plummets just before 2032, and that's doing the bare minimum heat pump scheme that you could do to your site. So the model costs that and gives you an idea about doing that, and how you squeak under the 2028-32 target, which is the red dot on the red dotted line. And then it curves its way to net zero as the grid greens up. And then there is a blue line, which is the whatever solution you happen to choose in the model. Model lets you dynamically choose different options and size them and turn bits on and turn bits off. And you'll see the blue line comes down as a little kink. And that's doing energy reduction measures. And you can see how little impact they really have on net zero, unfortunately. And hospitals have been doing this for ages. There's only so much you can squeeze out each year by doing these little jobs. And then it plummets down because this is a geothermal option, and it plummets down to the bottom, and then it's just relying upon the electricity load to green. So it gives you those options, gives you the carbon savings and the rest of it. But the thing it also does for you is it gives you some of the financial details there. And again, I've just cut and pasted some bits on, so it looks a bit tatty. So the yellow bits at the top say include the demand reduction. So that's the first little kink in the blue line. Then you choose geothermal heat, which is what I've done for this option. And then you can include solar PV, not because it's particularly green, but because it does help you with the financial model. And then the next box has the details about this hospital. So it's an intermediate sized hospital. It uses 15 million units of heat a year. It uses 7.5 million units of electricity. So it's medium sized. You can see the carbon graph I just talked you through below that. And then you can see the magic number right at the bottom, which is NPV 30 years. Now that means net present value over a 30-year period. And what it is all the savings minus all the costs. And you can see the effect is a minus 13 million. So if we took this to your board and said, I'd like to do this project, and they said, what's going to cost? You'll say, well, over the lifetime, it's going to cost us 13 million. They're not going to be overjoyed. So this is either not an option for this hospital, or you need to go back up to the data that's in their data and say, well, the site only uses 15 million units of heat a year, but a deep geothermal well typically gives you 25 million, maybe more units a year. So the question is, could I sell the remaining 10 million units? And then use that to bolster the NPV. So the model lets you do all those things. It also does a similar model for hydrogen or district heating using some district heating examples we've got, and for heat pumps. And really you need a model that works for your hospital for the option you want to choose. And the idea of the modeling was to try and help you do that piece of work and save you some time. So that's it. So I assume anybody wanting to join this procurement has done some modeling with us or their own modeling, and they're fairly comfortable that they can make it add up for them. We're going to the procurement part now. Simon, do you want to pick up here?
Yeah, thanks, Clive. And with apologies to anyone who was on yesterday's call, because this is going to look very familiar. Yeah, next slide, please, Clive. I was going to quick whistle stop of why Salisbury are involved. So we support a lot of organisations across the NHS and wider public sector with their procurements, not just in energy, but this is something that we've been supporting NH Power as a collaborative with for quite some time, and we carry out a lot of the procurements on behalf of Carbon Energy Fund as well. So we do sort of operate in this space quite a lot. And what we do for you as trusts or other organisations is all at no cost to you, which is a very rare phrase these days. So we'll stick with that one. Next slide, please, Clive. I think we're going to send the slides round anyway, Clive, aren't we, after?
Yeah.
As I say, we know the area we operate in, so we procured the solar farm for Wolverhampton Trust. If anyone's familiar with that, that's not a lake in the middle of Wolverhampton in the picture. It's a former landfill site that I think they're putting out about 5.5 meg, Clive, aren't they, from that site? It was a landfill site the council owned. They've leased it at a very reasonable rate to the trust, Wolverhampton Trust, and they're operating it. Veolia are the operator on that site, so they carry the risk, the maintenance, the operation, and there's a private wire under the west coast main line, into the hospital. So the hospital think they're going to be having electricity savings of about £1 million a year from that, and then obviously there's the green benefit on top of that as well. And we're looking at the next stage will be to put battery storage onto the site to be able to load, shift and even it out throughout the nighttime versus daytime use. And that's the first one in the NHS, so a large scale, what we call private wire, so a cable and 2 big plugs basically. Next slide, please, Clive. As Clive's mentioned, we've all found varying different pictures of what a geothermal installation looks like, but we've run the procurement for the first 5 sites. So that's ourselves at Salisbury. We're going to be going down to about 2,500 metres for our hot water. Eastbourne, who have got a combination of geothermal, solar, and pretty much everything else you can imagine. Wythenshawe, who the trust you heard from yesterday up in the north, they're part of Manchester Foundation Trust. And then we've got a couple of others, Southampton and Preston will be a new build hospital site. So to answer the earlier point about sort of collaboratives, do you have to do it with your neighbouring hospital? No, that's a pretty widespread fix there. And obviously if you've got physically connecting neighbours, it's a bit different in the geothermal world to just procuring as a collaborative. And that's been funded through public sector decarb scheme. Our scheme, for example, at Salisbury, we've put in about 1.25 million, I think 1.4 million. Carbon Energy Fund sourced PSDS funding for us of about 10. And then the rest of the geothermal is sitting on the risk of the supplier. And obviously Star Energy will hopefully that will work properly. So that will then be as a heat as a service funding model. There's all sorts of different ways of funding. Clive didn't mention, but we've got access to about 2.5 billion through UK Investment Bank of potential low-cost funding for providers. So having don't think a geothermal project is 20 million. You've got to have 20 million in your bank, because very few trusts do. Next slide, please. So the benefits of doing it together. The people have said resource, so we've picked up all the public contract regs and what will be the new Procurement Act compliance at the front end. By going out collaboratively as we do, this isn't you being told who your provider will be, so there may be a happy coincidence that all people in the collaborative pick the provider with the best offer. That may be the same provider, it may be different ones, and it will vary by size of the industry, by location, by drilling technique, by all sorts of things. And one of the strengths of bringing it to the market in one go, obviously, is potentially there is some shared, ability there to leverage a larger scheme to make it more of interest to the market. And next slide, please. So considerations for you as buyers, we ran the first tranche under what's called an innovation partnership, which is a procurement term for that previous procedure, how it was done. And it's very much, it's not your traditional procurement where you produce an output and a requirements document and the spec says everything about it. This is utilising expertise from industry. They know the best way to develop it. Some people may look at heat as a service model. So in other words, you buy the heat just as you buy your gas or your power. Currently, obviously, if you can put an investment into that yourselves, it will reduce your unit price. One of the good things about that heat as a service model is because we now have the Energy Act, which puts an obligation on public sector particularly to look at district heating schemes. At Salisbury, for example, we may well find that the house development land coming up the hill towards us for a rural site, they would have to look at connecting to any district heating network that we've established from the geothermal plant, which means they carry the cost of connection. We don't have to put our hands in our pocket again, but we do get a lower unit price as the more and more people connect to the system. And that equally again makes it more viable for geothermal operators. So there's all sorts of things, around being that way. Internal support is absolutely essential, and that's why I mentioned earlier whether it be useful to people if we almost did a feasibility phase ahead of asking you if you're up for a procurement. For some trusts who are that further back down the timeline, because it's that bit that can energize your boards and your estates team and your finance team to actually have a look at the art of the possible. Engage your comms teams very early on, and Dr. Mullen said it in his presentation as well. The F word, we are not fracking. As soon as you say to people, oh, we're drilling and getting water back, they think you're taking water out the earth rather than running it as a system. and it all does get very complicated. So we tackled that early on, certainly with Salisbury, and I know Eastbourne did as well, and actually ended up having huge support from the public to that. Next slide, please, Clive. There's a couple of considerations, one of which is a newer one, which Clive's mentioned the Cabinet Office a couple of times. So NHS organisations over the course of a year, and I think most are now in scope. The last one's going to be November 24, so we'll count that as being in scope anyway, have to go through the Cabinet Office spend control procedure. So you have to have an outline business case, and we've got a Cabinet Office template for it if you need it, or have a look on the Future NHS web link there. The spend controls team at NHS England are very supportive, if a little slow because there's not that many of them. But it's about having that outline business case before you go out to procure. So again, there is some advantage to doing a non-procurement market engagement bit around saying what are the options for our site if you're that further back in the process. And also, again, talking to key local partners, as I mentioned there, the Energy Act around district heating and that sort of thing. If you've got a university campus next to you, or a large industrial estate, or a housing complex, or anything like that, it's certainly worth talking to them about load sharing. Again, the more you can size a geothermal plant, the more efficient it becomes for the operator to work, and therefore your unit price drops, and it can become an income generation point for you as a trust as well. So all those sorts of things we can look at when we start looking at feasibilities as well. I think that's the last slide, Clive, isn't it? Apart from my contact details.
Yeah, that is. Please feel free to put your questions in the tab. I'm going to try and push on because we ask questions. We're using up the time, but I'll rush through the next bit if I can. Okay. If you sign up for the procurement, I want to give you an idea about sort of how much time was involved. So there's the pre-procurement stage. I estimate the number of days that be involved. A little table there. You'll be able to get this and look at it in detail off the website if you want to do it. The idea is you need to let us know in some sort of way we can wave in front of people's faces if they say, why did you put my name on the list? I need something official that says you agreed to being there. Okay, and then we can get documentation sorted out with your board. And the next phase, so the pre-procurement's the top box. Then the procurement itself, which I've said kicking off starting July, but there'll be a lot of stuff that goes on in July, getting documents and stuff ready and then going to bids and stuff. But an idea of the number of days down the side there as well. As you can see, there's 20 odd days of work there. We'll make it as simple as we can, but there is work required. And then once you start into the actual, we've chosen your preferred bidder, then it goes through the arrows on the left. It's try to show you roughly what the process looks like. You know, there's desktop feasibility. You zoom in stages to keep your risk of aborted costs down to get more and more certainty that there is definitely an option for you. So desktop seismic, which is roughly where Salisbury are at the moment, permitting and design. Some suppliers do a test well before they do a main well, and then there's the main drilling itself, and then there's the operation period, which is going to be at least 30 years. In the first procurement, we took 21 years just to get us to 2050, 28 years to 2050, with 7-year breaks or 7-year reviews on the price, so that we complied with the rules for service contract. But again, an estimate of the days, you can see the desktop feasibility cost about 60k, and you needn't pay that. The contractor can roll that up for you. And then this drilling phase takes about 12 months. It might be done in 1 or 2 or 3 steps. That's why I've grouped them on the left. But you're talking about for deep geothermal, 1.5 million and 12 months worth of work. So we need to agree quite carefully who's carrying what risks and what costs and how we deal with that. I'll say more about that later. Once you made the decision to drill, life gets a lot easier because the scheme is bankable at that stage, and therefore you can get a funder in and you can start to deal with everybody's costs. But that phase can cost 20 million and can take 18 months. So these are not trivial projects. If you go for the closed loop Seraphy system, then the feasibility is more like 20k. the prep, and they reckon it's bankable at that stage, and will take half the time. So you'd be talking about 10 million-ish for the drill and prep stage, and funding that at that time from a funder. So Serapy system looks altogether a bit easier and a bit quicker and a bit cheaper. What does it cost? Well, Simon's told you the answer. We aren't looking for money from you, but at the appropriate time, you are going to need advice and support. And while Simon and I and the other committee members will help you as best we can, we're not consultants. So to the extent you need consultants and stuff, you're going to have to engage those, and we can help you with that if you need it. How do you pay for the scheme? Well, what we've done so far is we've agreed the project little arrows that are shown down on the left of the stage. Each time we started an arrow, we said how much it's going to cost and who's going to pay for that. And generally, mostly it's been the contractor paying for it, but we've had some Salix grant and some other grant money towards them. And then at the end of that, we sit down together with the bidder and say, it's one of these three things. There's no scheme, and the contractor bears the costs and walks away, rubbing themselves for the pain. Or there is a scheme and they're comfortable to continue, but the trust withdraws because it's lost interest or whatever. I don't know, decide to shut the hospital down. I don't know what would cause a trust to withdraw, but if it did, it's got to pay up the costs that have been spent to that period of time. Or thirdly, and most likely, the scheme proceeds to the next stage and the cost incurred so far gets rolled up. And once you get to drill stage, then external funding option becomes available. The scheme is bankable, it can be funded, and we're looking at three funding options. One where the contractor funds it and carries the risk of it performing. Second one being contractor carrying the risk, but collaboratively funded using the 2.5 billion or so of UKIB money that has been ring fenced. Or thirdly, and a bit more bravely, we share the risk amongst ourselves as trust, and we share the finance amongst ourselves. And I imagine I'm going to struggle to get that model through for a little while. But if you look at this diagram, on the right-hand side, this coloured bar is meant to be the unit price of heat. So whatever that is, 10p a unit or whatever it is, it's made up of a finance element, a risk element, an O&M and life cycle element, and then possibly some level of management to make up the whatever it is, 10p or whatever it happens to be. Obviously, if you can put money in, the finance element shrinks. If you can find a way of dealing with the risk that's cheaper, that reduces the unit price of heat as well. So that's why we're trying to bring in the three funding options: contractor funded all-in price, UKIB option, so we shrink the dark blue element price, or third one, we fund with UKIB and share the risk and shrink both blue elements down to get you the cheapest energy possible. Okay, it's 1:45. I want to take questions. So the deadline for this is a commitment by the end of June. You got to give me something if you want to be there, so I can put you on a list and send that with the draft business case to Cabinet Office to see whether they're going to support us or not. It's looking hopeful. As soon as I got the list, I'll go to Cabinet Office and talk to them. Simon's already had an initial talk to them, and we'll start drafting each trust procurement documentation so that you can have it and put it through your approval process at the same time. So that'll keep us busy for a while. I've got to do some work with the marketplace to just make sure that I've got bidders for every scheme that wants to be there. There's no point taking something to market unless somebody's going to bid for it. And as soon as the approval comes through, then we can look to go to market. Okay, so do we want to do some questions?
There's a couple gone in the chat, one around PFI.
Yep.
So I'll answer a bit and then Clive knows a bit better than me. One of the nice things about geothermal is that a lot of the timelines actually coincide with those PFIs coming back to us, which is the situation we're looking at in some trusts. Others, I guess it's not going to be that case. So there will be a discussion on how to have with your PFI operator. I don't think it makes you less likely to receive PSDS though, Clive, does it?
No, I don't think it does affect it. The nice thing is we can, geothermal, if you're going to dig down a few kilometers, then, where you actually put the wellhead is a bit of a movable feast. So you can put it so that it's not in their zone at all, and the only interface we have is a heat exchanger with them. And as most PFIs have passed through on the energy costs, all this should have is the effect of reducing your energy costs and greening your site, which is something the PFI hospitals have been slower at than the NHS have been. So it would be a good thing there. So I hope that deals with that. That was Helena's question. And I think Great Western are on the list that I saw. So they're PFIs. So we've got at least one PFI, I think, who's wanting to sign up.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brian might know that a bit better than me, but they've got expansion land next to their PFI, which is theirs. So
Yeah.
as Clive said, exactly that, and theirs comes back in a fairly reasonable time frame
Yes.
to the NHS anyway. So yeah, there are all sorts of options.
Yeah. Okay. I'm very happy for somebody to come and raise a question. Let's have a look what's going back in the thing here. Clive, Simon. Okay. Oh, this is Brian. Yes, he's looking to make a commitment, but I appreciate it's all very tight for time. Okay. I think Brian, you have an agreement with NG, whatever they're called nowadays, and I think they supply heat to Truro Hospital. So you might have a quick route through that arrangement to the marketplace, but I'll leave it to you to work that out. Helena said, barrier to progress are the pressures. Sustainability can't compete with clinical funding and human resource. Yeah, you're quite right, Helena. We're all struggling a bit. And that's why Dr. Mullen's help has been so important to us. And why I was pleased to have a doctor on the call, because it's the system wanting to get green that's going to make this thing happen. And it's just us poor estates bods are going to have to find a way to do it. But then everybody, clinical, are trying to green their processes. We've all got a sustainability task to do. Have we got any more questions? Don't be shy. If you haven't, then I'll sign off and wish you all the very best. But I'm very happy Simon are here and I are here. We can help you. Oh, Carrie, fire away. Do you want to say your question? Yeah.
No, I fear this is probably a sort of daft laddie question. If we don't have capacity and we don't really have any funding, but we do see the benefit and we've proven it through the modelling, can we still sign up for the procurement and sort of work our way through it? Or is there sort of a certain cutoff that says you need these sort of pieces of information, not just approvals?
I'm happy to sort of work alongside your pace outside the first sort of tranche, if you like. It's well worth. We haven't got a big resource to do this at Salisbury. We lent very heavily on the fact we're Carbon Energy Fund members, and whilst NH Power is entirely neutral about who you use, they do obviously have a huge wealth of expertise. Christina and the team at South Warwickshire did that as well, and they had a very, very small sustainability team, if you like. So there's a lot that can be done for you. Never feel free to ask for help, and we can always try and sort out either nicking somebody else's business cases and that sort of thing, which may shorten your timelines. But we do this as a collaborative. So, please don't sit at the back thinking, oh, I've only got George who helps me on a Thursday afternoon. There's all different ways of skinning a cat on this one.
No, I think that's really appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll do our best to help you. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
Terry,
the suppliers will do a lot of work for you too. There's quite a lot of money in this for them. So they are more than they're very different to working with the sort of traditional energy suppliers, if you like. They're quite responsive because they're a small community. They're quite responsive to helping people out in different ways as well.
Yes. Okay. Anything else? Right. Okay. Well, if that's it, I'll thank you all. I'll be at Eden tomorrow, so any of you passing by, join us, join the party, and we'll go and see how Eden's heated by its deep geothermal well, which is much similar to yours, Brian. But I think I'm not sure anybody from your Truro is coming. But anyway, maybe they are.
I did have a conversation with Stephen Heap yesterday. Unfortunately, I've not been able to make it or get team aren't available. But we'll pursue in parallel. I have been down to see the Eden team a couple of years ago when I started that journey with Bath and Salisbury. So I've got some familiarity, but we'll try and catch up separately with them and with yourselves.
Well, Eden Geothermal are helpfully down that neck of the woods as well. I must admit, I've got slight trepidation about Eden because for reasons known to themselves, well, I think the fact that they were planning to drill 5 kilometers into granite to use the world's biggest rig is frighteningly big. Most hospitals would not need a rig, anything like the Eden one. But the rig's gone now, so we won't see that. So I'm hoping it's not going to scare anybody to death. But there is a patch of earth where the kit sat for a while, and then there are a few pipes, and then we'll all stand around and say, "Oh, there's a pipe, oh, there's a valve," and that's about it. But so it's pleasantly small when it's done. Okay, anything else? Can I thank you all for coming, and shout to Simon, myself, Vanessa, anybody if you want some help, we'll do our best to help you.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Good to see everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank
Yeah,
you.
then. Bye then.
Cheers.